how can I look at a script and do a better job of seeing the moments that are there, seeing the character moments that are there. So I started talking to scriptwriters and really understanding what script structure was about, because script structure kind of brought a lot of the visual structure with it. So right in the interview, I could start talking about what the screenwriter's doing and how I can use that as impetus to kind of catapult into a whole new direction for the visuals.
In this conversation, we get to talk to Shelly Johnson, ASC, a legendary cinematographer, filmmaker, and president of the American Society of Cinematographers. From his several decades in the industry, Shelly shares a unique perspective on the evolution of cinematic storytelling. We discuss the significant shifts from film to digital, the critical importance of collaboration, the intricacies of navigating the politics of the industry, and so much more. This conversation is a goldmine of insights, offering a wealth of knowledge and value from Shelly Johnson, ASC. Thank you again for being here today and for spending a little bit of time with me. Just excited to have you both as a great cinematographer, but also as the president of the ASC. So thank you.
Yeah, appreciate your time. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And yeah, I was curious, did you grow up in an artistic household?
Well, sort of. My father worked in the television industry in local Los Angeles. He directed the evening news with Baxter Ward, which is probably a little before your time, but Baxter Ward was like a local newscaster at ABC. And my dad used to direct the news. So I remember he had there was, I think, a 4 o'clock broadcast and a 11 o'clock broadcast. So he would go at 4, do the news, come back, have dinner with us, the family, put us to bed, go back, do the evening news, and come home. And so he eventually got out of directing the news and got into directing variety specials. So he did Perry Como Christmas specials and Peggy Fleming ice skating specials, things like that. And those were all shot on location. And this is at a time when videotape was very bulky, and the only way to really get to remote locations was to shoot film. So he shot a lot of these specials that he did on 16 millimeter film.
Oh, wow.
And so the fun part for me was, if he's shooting in a place, he might shoot the show for 8 days for an hour-long variety show, but then he would stay for 3 or 4 days afterwards and shoot scenics and all the wraparounds and bumpers and things they need for the body of the show. And I would stay with him.
Wow.
And so and that looked like he and I in a van with an AS going around, and I was 10 years old. And so I was schlepping, whatever, tripods and batteries for him. And he actually taught me how to load mags. He actually trusted me to load mags at 10 years old. So then there were a couple times I got stuck and he had to reach into the changing bag and fix whatever I had, messed up in there. But I actually assisted for him.
So you were in the business, basically.
I was well into it. And it's hilarious because I always liked his camera crews. They seemed to be having the most fun. They were the funniest. And there's, he shot his shows with 3 cameras, and so I think that was largely that was a huge influence on me wanting to get into camera, because it just looked like they were having the most fun. I really wanted to do that, and funny enough, when I did get old enough and start working in his camera department, his camera crew went from being very warm and welcoming to the director's son to being very unwelcoming to a new member who might want to take a job away from them due to nepotism. So I didn't spend much time working with my dad because I didn't feel like I was welcomed by my dad, but I was not welcomed by anyone else.
Once you're a peer, that's a different story.
Yeah, so I struck out on my own at that point, and everyone seemed to understand, so that was fine.
Were you always interested in camera? Did you consider anything else, or you were like, I know this is what I want to pursue?
I knew it's what I wanted to pursue, and my dad being a director, he had a subscription to American Cinematographer. Wow. So that was coming into the house. And so I would read through, all of the articles. And so I knew who the cinematographers were. And at one point, my dad asked, if you figured out, this is probably when I'm still in high school, if you figured out what you want to do with your life. And I said, yeah, I think I want to be a cinematographer. And his reply was, well, why stop there? Why aim so low?
Wow. Okay. He was trying.
I don't know. It doesn't seem low to me. But I always liked that reaction of his. So yes, I did aim for being a cinematographer, and I don't feel like I aimed low. I feel like I aimed exactly square on to what I wanted, and it's sort of, for me, it's like the one thing I can do anyway. So anything else, I'd be pretty terrible at.
Yeah. So you found that's really cool. I don't meet many people who were able to say at an early age, like, this is what I want to do. And just pursue. And you were also in the right place.
Yeah, and who knows if I would have had that kind of conviction had I not been exposed to it.
So much has changed, obviously, technologically and in that kind of sense, but as a whole, what would you say are some of the biggest changes that you've seen in the industry over the years?
Well, I mean, certainly the change from film to digital, extremely dramatic. Up to that point for me, I graduated from film school in 1980 and then shot my first feature in 1985 and have been working as a cinematographer since then. So up to that point, it was all film stocks, and really you had to learn every new film stock every year or two. Kodak would release a film stock and of a new speed, a new 200 speed stock, or a year later a new 400 speed stock. A year after that, a new 100 speed stock, whatever. And so you would learn the film stocks. A lot of young cinematographer's life back then was devoted to really understanding how film saw an image, because you didn't get what you saw. Film saw in its own way, and depending on what film stock you had, each stock was a little different. And so the only way to really learn that was trial and error. And so I used to load up a lot of motion picture film into still cameras and take it in to be processed and learn a lot where shadows is, where do the darkest shadows roll into black and things like that, so you could meter it and know exactly where you were. Because there was no preview. It was only pre-visualizing. That's all you could do. And so you would gain an understanding of exactly how film worked, precisely how it worked,
right.
How the silver highlight crystals, the dye couplers, how they respond to chemistry, how they respond to temperature, because all of that understanding, you had to sort of put in a filter as you were looking at an image and predict what that image was going to do during all those various steps. Printing steps, the same thing. I mean, you're basically re-photographing the negative now and going through those steps again. So you had a pretty good knowledge of how film worked and what you could do to manipulate it. When we went to digital, of course, all that changed. And what was interesting about the digital transition was we probably made the transition to digital a little bit early. And so digital wasn't such a much at the beginning, and a lot of people were sort of against moving to digital because it just wasn't quite there yet.
Right.
And two ththings happened. Panavision came out with the Genesis. And even though it's just a high-def camera, it's a 1920 by 1080 camera, it was a Sony camera that they kind of retooled. It was an F-35 that they retooled. But what they did was they put their curve on it. They put what they call their Panalog curve. And it didn't get you any more range, but it gave you a curve. It just gave you something nice to look at that wasn't electronic looking. It was slow, it was big, it was heavy. There's one out there, you'll see. They weren't all that impressive because they weren't small and compact. They were like film cameras. And the first ones, they recorded on the tape, and so it was a little clunky. And but anyway, believe it or not, that was sort of a little bit of a game changer for me, because once I learned the Genesis, I could kind of freely use it. But I was spending a lot of time still on film and only going to Genesis when I had to in it. And when I started working with Joe Johnston, he, because of his background with ILM and his connection with George Lucas, George had been doing all of the his tests in high def and shooting all his Star Wars films in high def. And Joe really wanted to shoot something in high def. So the first thing we did was Jurassic Park 3. The previous one had been done on film. So it was decided, no, we'll stay with film. And Spielberg wanted us to stay with film, so that was easy. The next film we did was Hidalgo. He really wanted to shoot digital there. And I talked him out of it because we were doing so many things in the desert. I was a little afraid of the dust and the heat. I said, it's going to smell problems. And it's a big screen, period Western, so film kind of was calling for that one. Good, I talked him out of that. Then along comes The Wolfman. And it's a horror film, a lot of nights, deep blacks. And we didn't have a lot of prep. So I was able to kind of talk him out of shooting digital because of the short prep and all that. And okay, then along comes Captain America. So Captain America happens, and the phone call went something like this. It's like, okay, Shelly, we're going to shoot Captain America, and we're shooting digital. So the choice of the camera is yours, but this is happening.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay. He didn't even take a breath. It's like, I want you and digital. So
wow.
Message delivered. And so Captain America occurred right at the time that the Alexa was coming out, but there weren't a lot of them. And I needed a lot of cameras for Captain America because it was a big film. So I ended up shooting Captain America on Genesis. And it was probably one of the last films to be shot on Genesis. But if you sort of stayed in the zone where that camera really did work, you got good results. You know, it's not a 400 speed camera. It's more like a 250 speed camera. It is big, it's heavy, it's fat. So if you have a relationship with that concept, you're okay.
Yeah.
It was probably left a little bit desired on day exteriors, but if you were careful, you know, you could kind of get away with it. Then when Alexa came about, that was a total game changer. I think at that point with the Alexa, nobody had any problem. No film cinematographer had any issue switching over at that point, because that was, you know, almost darn close to a sideways step, if not even a slight improvement in some areas, because you had more speed. You know, you could shoot in lower light and all that with the Alexa. So
it's funny to hear it was more convenient or more easier for you to think, oh, we should shoot film, because nowadays it's like thinking to shoot film is the exact opposite. You're thinking, man, it's a much intricate process. There's a lot more components involved. Shoot digital is easier. Yeah.
It's so funny because it really isn't. Film. Want to know the workflow to film? Shoot film, send it to the lab.
Yeah.
Are you going to print it?
Right.
Are you going to, you know? But there's no LUTs. There's your film stocks. But the at that point, the digital workflows had not been really well thought out. Every time you did a movie, you had to sort of reinvent the workflow. So the film workflow everyone knew. But you're right. Nowadays, if ever I pitch film on anything, I'm usually walking down the hallway, and the production manager will walk up to me and have a very clandestine conversation. So, Shelly, can you please explain to me the workflow for film? You know?
So we can sell it.
Like yeah. And just so I know what to budget, because they have no idea, and because it has been a while. And digital's gotten simpler, and everyone's got their head around it. And in many ways, digital has surpassed film in terms of dynamic range and things like that. You can almost do more with digital. But like any tool, it's a tool. You know, right. You're telling a story, and you try to identify what the tools do well. Yeah. You know, what sets you up for success, you know, on a storytelling level. And you know, for being a cinematographer, it's hilarious because about a third of the job is technical. I think about a third of the job is the storytelling and the artistry. The other third is the politics.
Yeah.
Can you play the politics? Because so much of the artistry needs to make it to the screen, and that artistry makes it to the screen with your savvy kind of political moves. how you get people behind your ideas, how and how you continue the enthusiasm for those ideas through shooting into post-production. How do you keep them from getting thrown on the editing room floor or changed into something else right through the end to the screen? I mean, when you think about what actually makes it to the screen at the end, that happens with a lot of conviction because months pass after I shoot it. Yeah. And anything can happen.
Well, and that's a skill, that's a big skill to develop in and of itself, just that ability to develop a vision strong enough that you believe it, and then be able to sell it to others, and then be able to stay true to that conviction throughout such a long process. That's kind of a skill that I guess I don't hear much talk about. So maybe we can touch a little bit on how you've done it and how you think people can how can you apply that to, because obviously once you develop that, you can apply it to so many areas of your life. Oh, yeah. But just for the job itself, it's like, if you can do that, then that's a third of the job.
Well, interesting. You brought up, different parts of your life, because I probably started with that skill based on techniques that I used and that anyone can use if you're into any kind of sports or anything like that. I used to swim. So when you're swimming, everything's goal oriented. I want to reach this time by this date. I want to be able to perform this act by this time. Everything's goals, setting goals and achieving them. And so that can very much be the same as film. Well, with with an added kind of idea that coming out of film caused you to need to pre-visualize, to need to start making creative decisions long before you start shooting. Because you had to prepare. You had to understand what the film was going to see, how it was going to feel on the screen. That was rarely improvisational, at least for me, and mostly planned. So when you do that, you start developing all your reasons why. All your ideas have a reason to be. So you start developing what those reasons are. And that's all based on your read of the script, your interpretation of the script, where you picture the script going, your conversations with the director and the designer or anyone else you want to collaborate with. And what I try to do is I try to come in early with ideas. And whether those ideas develop into something else or those ideas tend to stick, if you can kind of be the idea person, a lot of people will come to you, because it's surprising how many people really don't have an idea on what they want to go, where they want to go with something. And if they can piggyback onto something that I'm thinking, all the better. So politically, sometimes a DP needs to make it seem like it's their idea, which is fine. Which when I was coming up, I think DPs were a little more, I think had a lot more possession of the artistry and their ideas. These days, not so much. These days, you're playing a much more strategic chess game when it comes to getting your ideas on screen. So if it needs to be the director's idea, you can plant enough seeds to make it the director's idea. Yeah. And that can happen over a period of days. It can happen in 1 minute. One van ride. Yeah. But anytime a director says, "Oh, here, you ride in the vehicle with me," it's like I always say yes. It's like any kind of if you can get stuck in a vehicle with the director, that's one of the best things. And because I get a lot done, and a lot of it is really showing enthusiasm. If you do have an idea, being excited about it. I do have one rule: I'll only pitch an idea twice. And because there's a point, if someone says no to an idea, it's like chances are, okay, they're not seeing the idea. Either they don't understand it or they just straight up don't agree with it. But if I feel strongly, I'll pitch the idea a second time, and I'll tell them I'm doing it. I said, okay, now.
You might take a different little tweak of an angle.
Well, I'll usually say, look, okay, you said no to this idea once before, but let me just pitch it to you one more time because I think it has some merit, and here's why, and here's where I see it going. So I'll maybe add a little more detail, or maybe add in, as you're suggesting, like a facet that I've learned since I pitched it the first time, and here's where this idea can go. I won't like ram it down their throat or anything like that. I'll be really, really careful about how I do it, but just say the only reason I'm pitching it twice is because I believe in it.
Yeah.
And if the answer is no, I'll be the first one to kick that thing out the door. You know, it's an idea for another movie.
Sure.
And I'm not going to sit there and try to get you to say yes to something that they clearly don't want. You know?
Right.
But sometimes you can turn them around. I'm surprised how often the second go that directors will go, okay, let's try it. You know, that's starting to sound good. All right. But often, probably even more often, it might lead to just something else that is the right.
Sure.
It's a creative conversation, and you know, and sometimes I'll tell people I have half an idea. I have a half-baked idea. You want to hear a half-baked, stupid idea? I've got one. And it's not the final idea, but it's probably going to start the conversation that'll lead us to the final idea. And just lay a stupid idea out there. And label that you know isn't right, but I can often say, here's what I think is working about this idea. Yeah. The characters are relating to this character that way, or whatever it is. And then at least the director can start maybe riffing on that.
Yeah, add their piece to the idea.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then it becomes a conversation. So anytime that's happening, it's good. And, you know, every director is different. I tend to want to talk to directors early, as early as possible, because as prep goes on, a director's attention starts to fan out in unimaginable directions.
Yeah.
I mean, what a director's day is like, you know. What do you think of this necktie? What about this pocket watch? Oh, by the way, the main actor just fell out. Oh, we need to cut $1 million out of the budget. You know, oh, what color should the car be? I mean, just like all day long.
Yeah,
that kind of
right. It's decision after decision.
Yeah, and the early part of prep, they're kind of more ready to have a creative discussion, and because that's when they're kind of laying their groundwork. And as prep goes on, and they become more scattered, they become less available just in their own minds to even talk creatively. But if I can go back, you know, if we're going to shoot a scene tomorrow, and I always write down everything a director says to me, I write it right on the script. And if I can say to that director, oh, in one of our first conversations, you mentioned, for example, a silhouette in the window. And I was thinking about that, and why don't we start with that? Why don't we, you know, here's the time of day, and let's get that. And you see them kind of look at me and see this kind of weight being lifted from their shoulders, thinking, oh my God, someone was actually listening 2 months ago when I said that. And half the time they forget they even said it. But it's, if you can be that type of collaborator who is there kind of the guardian of their ideas, and someone who's going to continue their ideas creatively into the story and into the filmmaking process, which can be daunting for them, then you've got a real collaborator there.
You really have to develop an ability to not hold your ideas too tight, too closely. Because that's, and maybe it just also comes with experience, but you can see how a lot of people, when you're an artist and you feel like, oh, this is my thing, my contribution, then someone turns you down, you can feel like, oh, it's something against me. But then you really have to develop that sense of thinking about the big picture, thinking about, okay, this guy in front of me is thinking about 1 billion things a minute. So, you know, it might be a great idea, but if it doesn't, you know, ultimately you're there to serve that person, to serve the story. You know, so developing those skills is a big part of it.
It sure is. You said something very important. I mean, about that, it's you're bang on, first of all. And when you think about that, if you're the type of person that it's going to sound super strange, but if you're the type of person that a director can say no to, feels comfortable saying no to, and they know they're not going to bruise my ego or anything like that I'll roll with it, or I'm willing to go down whatever path they want. You know, if I'm willing to admit, okay, this isn't the idea, no problem. But we don't know what the idea is, but we're gonna find it. You know, I'm not gonna, you know, harp on about this. I'm gonna keep going, and again, I might invoke my my second time rule, but there won't be a third time, because twice is it. But you're right. You need to be a collaborator, and you're not a collaborator if I'm just trying to stand up for my own ideas out of my ego, And I think when a cinematographer gets older, the ego is like the first thing you kind of like see. Yeah. There's really no use for that. There's no use for it. And the ego isn't getting me anywhere. And so believe it or not, the more work you do, the easier it is to let go of those types of ideas, because you think about it as a collaboration, and it's not an idea that's going to have any resonance unless the director and the cinematographer are on board with it or are in agreement with it, because it all has to happen through the whole post process. It has to carry. So it's important. And sometimes I'll even see, we'll go through that process you just discussed, and we'll arrive at an idea together, a new idea. And I'll see that idea. I'll see the editor kind of not pay attention to that idea. And sometimes I'll bring up, it's like, remember when we did this with that scene? Do we want to revisit that? Because I remember on set, that was impactful. And that was kind of the goal of this scene, was to create this union between these characters, whatever the thing was. And do we want to resurrect that in the cut? Because there was a time when that was a key element. Yeah. And sometimes you can bring things back from the dead, because just in the post process, the same thing happens to the director, where different influences come in and they kind of lose track. So it's good.
Yeah. How much of those skills are you purposely going, okay, I am going to work on my communication skills, I am going to work on the way I present things, I'm going to, or how much are you letting those, okay, I'm gonna improve because I'm going through the process over and over again, or or are you really going, okay, I'm gonna read some books about this because I gotta get better at it?
Yeah. Okay. Well, everything across the spectrum, you're constantly reevaluating. Usually at the end of every movie, I'll have a very frank conversation with myself on what I thought worked, and particularly what I thought didn't work. Where were the lost opportunities, or where was something I did behaviorally where I lost ground? Early in my career, there were times when I may not have been as patient as I should have been, or hurt that things weren't happening, in the way that my plans kind of outlined. I wasn't rolling with things or understanding enough, of other people. And people used to tell me, "Oh, you seem so calm on this set," but on the inside, I was like boiling over. And so I'm glad that whatever was happening I wasn't overly extroverted about it. It wasn't coming out too much. But if I was actually doing what I was feeling, it would have been really ugly. And so I knew I had to get my head around how to just keep myself calm and available in a place to help people. And the more you work, the more you work closely with your crews. And I've had a very, very long-standing crew. You start to trust in those people. You start to look at, okay, what's working with this relationship? Because I've had the same grip for 35 years, the same operator for 40 years. How is that possible? How is that's like a family member. Yeah. And so you go through the good and the bad. You go through everything: divorces, illnesses, good times. It all happens together, and you cut people slack. If someone says something sideways to me, but that's someone who's worked for me for 30 years, I'm going to let it go. Yeah. I'm not going to make a big deal about it, because I know they didn't mean it. Or it's just the heat of the moment. It's a passionate business, and people say things all the time, and it's mostly out of passion, and it's like literally nothing's personal. And it's really important to remember almost anything bad that happens on the set, unless it's a catastrophe and someone gets hurt or something like that. But usually if it's just a little annoyance on the set, whatever, you get mad at the boom operator or something, you'll be laughing about it over a beer probably that night. You know, it's literally not personal. And I think pretty much everyone understands that, and everyone's willing to kind of look at it that way. But I went through a long period, I still am, on what can I improve. Some of it is, like, one thing that really helped me was script structure. How can I look at a script and do a better job of seeing the moments that are there, seeing the character moments that are there. So I started talking to script writers and really understanding what script structure was about, because script structure kind of brought a lot of the visual structure with it. And so right in the interview, I could start talking about what the screenwriter's doing and how I can use that as impetus to kind of catapult into a whole new direction for the visuals. That's strictly based on the script, which of course everyone's basing everything on. So obviously a good place to start. But it's constant learning, and it becomes very clear that you never become an expert. It's all, you become more experienced, and you might even become somewhat of a master at it.
Right.
But in order for the industry to not pass you by, you sort of have to keep learning.
Yeah, keep evolving.
Keep evolving, and not only, you know, even artistically, you don't want to rely on some dated idea, you know, to get you through a scene. If this worked really well for you for a scene you did in 1994, it doesn't mean it's going to work really well in 2024, you know. And it's good to kind of really challenge yourself to do good work, and that's something that I think comes from the film. It's easier for someone who worked in film, because when you were coming up in film, you always felt like, I'll speak for myself, I always felt like I was completely out of control. You know, I kind of understood film, but you kind of don't. Right. Film always surprised you, sometimes in good ways and sometimes in ways you didn't expect. But there are things that you're constantly learning and knowing that you need to learn as a technology changes and keep current with it. And so I guess there's always kind of that understanding that I'm never going to know everything. Right. And I have to work just as hard to learn newer techniques, create newer techniques, work outside my comfort zone, so that I'm challenging myself to create lighting that's expressive. And what happens when you work outside your comfort zone? You're uncomfortable.
Right, yeah.
Right? It doesn't feel very good.
You have to stay uncomfortable
right.
for the rest of your life.
That takes some training.
Yeah.
But you get incredibly energized if something works, or even if you get close to something that works. There's a great Bill Fraker quote that said, you learn more from testing by the things that don't work than the things that do work, which is totally true.
That's so true. Yeah.
And the same with film. You might have a goal, an image in your mind that you're trying to hit that you just haven't hit yet. And in my long conversation with myself, okay, that scene where I really wanted to challenge myself, I didn't get there. You know, what am I missing? How come I didn't hit that? You know, and what am I missing? And you try to identify what those things are. And it's like the opposite of beating yourself up. It's like you're just creating a strategy, a new goal that you can pursue next time. You know,
there's a lot there to learn. That's really cool, because I love hearing about all the interpersonal skills that you have to develop that come with the job. That, you know, they're kind of unspoken skills that you really have to work on. I was curious too, what was your journey from cinematographer working on all these films to then president of the ASC? Okay, so the ASC is it's always like, okay, I had American Cinematographer magazine when I was a kid, so I knew what the ASC was. And occasionally, you know, we lived in a neighborhood where there was some filming.
So if I woke up in the morning, looked out my window and saw a bunch of white trucks lining the curb, there was some house somewhere in the neighborhood there was a film crew. So I actually got to see a few ASC members working. I got to see Bill Fraker work and Conrad Hall work and John Alonzo, and all these people came to my neighborhood to shoot in neighbors' homes.
That's crazy.
And I knew from the magazine who they were. So the ASC always seemed like this impossible thing that was just out there. Like, that'll never. That's just so far away. It was hard to even imagine it. And suddenly when that is a possibility, you get kind of, overwhelmed with this wave of just, being in this honorable place. And the first time you walk through, everyone's got a conversation, got a story about the first time they walked through the door. I remember the first time I walked through the door, I was nominated early in my career for one of the awards, one of the really early awards they did. And they have a nominees dinner. And I was late. Because I was shooting in LA. And I called Patty, who was here, and said, is it okay if I come late? Because I'll be shooting and we're going to wrap, and I'm going to run home and grab my wife and we're going to get down there. And they said, oh yeah, just come when you come. It's all good. So when I walked in the door, you take 2 steps in the door and you're in the foyer, and I'm looking forward, and the whole clubhouse was full of tables and everyone's sitting having dinner already. But I see Haskell Wexler, Vilmos Zsigmond, Laszlo Kovacs, Bill Fraker, Harry Wolf, Owen Reisman. You see Haskell. Every hero is just sitting there right in front of you. And I think we were both standing there until someone came up. I think it was Stanley Cortez came up and said hi,
Wow.
and showed us where to sit. And it was crazy. And so when I finally did become a member here, I was thinking about all those kind of stories and the kind of history that's in this place. And then, when you're a young cinematographer and you become a member of the ASC, your chances are you are a member of the ASC because you work. You're working a lot. And I was working a lot. So I would do as much as I could, but I would always promise the staff, whenever I get time, I'm going to do more. You'll never get rid of me. I'm going to do more. And literally 20 years passed.
Wow.
And I was able to do more, so I was able to run for the board. And to me, what that is about is supporting the members and the society, doing anything I can for those two entities. That's everything I do is about the members and the society, and what is good for them. What is good for Shelly has nothing to do with what's good for them. I mean, absolutely zero. And so it's really a job about really thinking. So the ASC is in a unique position where we can sort of become like an energy force for a lot of the people that are out of work. A lot of our members are out of work, and even a lot of just fellow cinematographers, vendors, sponsors. All these people are out of work right now. And we're in a unique position where we can help remind people why they became cinematographers, why they became, lighting, manufacturers, things like that, with this time, because we can be with them now. And so we're amping up what we're doing here to everything we do, every movement we make is about creating that kind of union.
That's awesome. Well, congratulations, first of all, because that's a big.
It's a huge responsibility. I'm feeling it. It's a huge responsibility.
But it's got to be so special too, like what you're saying, growing up, seeing the magazine, growing up and seeing those people working. And then it's like one of those things that you would have never probably imagined.
It still isn't real.
Yeah. That's really special. Yeah, you had a quote somewhere that I found, and you said, "Would love for the ASC to serve as a reminder of why we all became cinematographers in the first place, to be a place where we can reinitiate our creative energy and prepare ourselves for the opportunities to come." And I think that's kind of what you were touching on.
That's the plan.
Yeah.
And that's an ongoing pursuit. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's not going to happen in a month.
Sure.
That's going to never stop happening, hopefully. That kind of goal, and literally almost everything we do, we kind of go down and without even knowing it, maybe even going down that checklist and making sure we're ticking those boxes, and write down the little things. And sometimes it's just talking to a staff member where you have something you want to do and something doesn't quite sit right with them, and they'll tell you, it's like, I don't know, there's something about the way we're doing this that isn't quite right, and it'll cause me to think, well, I wonder what we can do. And I start thinking about, well, why are we doing this, whatever it is we're about to do? What's our goal with it? And how can we really make whatever that goal is, put it on steroids and bring that to the forefront and make that about everything we're doing, for that particular event or a program that we're doing, master class, whatever it is. So there's a lot of help here. Yeah. I'm in no way alone. In fact, I'm far from alone. And all I do is, yak. Pretty much everyone else does everything, but but I think I hope that I'm steering the ship in a way that the people that came before me would respect. Yeah.
That's great. That's great to hear, because, I mean, you were talking about kind of seeing the ASC as this entity that's out there and unreachable, unachievable, and I can relate with that feeling even before I ever came to visit, because I have friends that work here and they invited me to come, and just when you walk in and you see the pictures, I mean, you got to see the people, and I've seen a lot of the working, at the parties, and it's just such a special place, and I love hearing your desire to really help people, to really help people elevate themselves and bring in that community aspect, because that's so needed in this time. And I think especially younger filmmakers that don't really have a community or don't really have a lot of relationships in the industry, it's hard to feel like, okay, where do I go to improve myself? Where do I go to find support? Where do I go to find inspiration? So it's great to have that, the ASC kind of look to be that.
Sure, that, and also I would say for people in that position, who aren't in LA, who don't have access to this, certainly they have access to the magazine, they have access to the internet, but something they can do too, and so much of what we've talked about is you have access to yourself. You can better yourself, you can prepare yourself, because one thing I do know about the industry is that you never know what that next opportunity is going to be. You may think you know. You may think you have your path mapped out. I thought that. I couldn't have been more wrong. All of my big milestones came right out of left field, completely blindsided. And the best thing I could do was prepare myself for an opportunity that was going to come, but I had no idea when or where or how. And that you can do from home. It's a lot of reading. It's a lot of getting out and shooting, even if it's on your phone. It's getting out and kind of creating your own visual voice, and how that voice is going to develop, how it's going to develop from a student to a professional, how it's going to develop from a commercial cinematographer to a narrative cinematographer. You create that voice and you create that persona. And in fact, you have to, because if you don't, you're just going to be one of a million other cinematographers. And you have to kind of put your personality out there, get yourself out there. So it's important. How would you say that you can develop that personal voice, that personal, what makes you stand out? Because it's not necessarily technical skills. I mean, that plays a part in it, but it really, at that point, we're talking more about the artistry. So how do you, is it just constantly staying in a state of learning, growing? In a way, it's also noticing what excites you. Like for me, sometimes I just get excited when I see a certain color blue in the ocean. And what are you going to do with that information? Other than just notice, I'm really excited by that color blue. There's nothing wrong with that. Well, you can start doing that through everything you do. Look when the sun comes out after it rains. Look what happens to the wet street. Like, oh my God, I wonder if I could. In fact, that just happened to me. That kind of like when the clouds part and the sun comes out, and it's just raining or just finishing raining, everything's kind of steaming. That hot white light. I had to do this. I did this project about Magellan, and there was a big storm in it, and there was a scene kind of that kind of progressed after the storm, and so I wanted to obviously contrast with the storm, and I wanted to get this kind of steamy effect. And the set was a ship that was on stage, and it was soaking wet. And when I powered all the lights on, and it started to kind of steam.
Oh, wow.
I thought, oh my God, this is the event. And even the director noticed it. He's like, the whole stage feels like we just cleared a storm.
Wow.
I said, well, good. Yeah. And I was glad that I'm glad that he termed it. It didn't look like, it felt like, so, and that's a lot of what it is. Whatever that color blue is doing to me in the ocean, it's making me feel something that hopefully I want the audience to feel. And so you start working on that level as to how can I get the audience to feel this same energy.
Right. Yeah, I was talking to John Simmons, and one of the big takeaways from him was just the importance of being present.
Yeah.
The importance of enjoying moments and finding things in moments, because like you're saying, you might be walking and you see this light, and in the moment, sure, it doesn't necessarily translate to a job, but if you're present, if you're thinking, okay, I'm going to store that in a folder in my hard drive, but it takes a lot of work. And I think that is, again, thinking of like younger, my generation, myself included, it's so hard often to be present, to be really taking things in, because we're so distracted all the time.
Yeah, you sort of have to train yourself to do it, don't you? I mean, it's because it's like anything. You do have to train yourself to do it, and it might even seem pointless,
right?
Because you look at it and go, well, what can I do with this information right now? Well, not a whole hell of a lot, but you can certainly at least start to learn about what excites you and what. And it is. You do enjoy that. It is the reason you would do it. If anyone's looking for a reason, is exactly what Johnny said. It was just enjoy it. Make that an enjoyable thing. There's yes, the job is full of pressures and plans and artistic journeys and endeavors but it's also really fun. Yeah, it's a very fun business. It's funny. You're working with a lot of really amazing people, and that, so it's easy to kind of, once you get the ball rolling, you can keep the creative juices rolling. Because one thing that's really hilarious is that so many of the grips, electricians, people like that, have been to film school. I'm not fooling anybody. If I'm pretending, I've got things under control, they know exactly when I'm looking for an idea, or if something dried up on me and I need help, and they are there to help, and I try to put them in a position to help, and so that's a lot of it too. It's kind of, becoming the person who's ready to kind of work on all those different levels, identifying what those levels are, and it takes time. But I read once that the business is more or less designed to kind of weed out the riffraff, the people that are in the business and the people that really want to be here.
That's true. That is true, because it's not an easy job. I mean, it's a very special job, and like you were saying, you get to do so many great things and work with a lot of talented people. But you were also talking earlier when you were talking about learning film and really learning and really pouring yourself into all the minutia that goes into that. And I was thinking back when we were talking about technology, because technology is great, obviously helps us be productive, efficient, but it also helps us or makes us a little bit lazy, and even where things are headed now, you don't have to read certain things because you can just put it in ChatGPT, and everything is becoming easier. How do we balance the benefits of technology and the advancements that helps us do things better or more efficiently with then the need to develop that artistry as well, and we can't lean on the other one.
No. Well, if you do, you're just going to steer yourself right toward the middle of the road where everyone else is again and fall into being a cinematographer that no one knows. You're there. You'll just be like a million others. And like everything in the business, the business changes. So a lot of, I think, from what you're saying, made me think, okay, a lot of what a new cinematographer needs to learn now is not to rely on this technology. Understand it, learn it,
Sure.
and maybe use it as an enhancement, but nothing that you're going to build a foundation on.
Yeah.
Like everyone else, you're still looking for a way to express your individual voice. And that's not going to happen with AI. The way you might be able to use AI in a creative way that's individual, but keep in mind AI is 100,000 people's other voices.
Yeah,
who
right.
spoke before you. There's nothing original about it. I would say it becomes probably a much more focused intent for a young cinematographer, filmmaker to train themselves to use these tools, because as you said, it's all too tempting to rely on them because it's just so easy. And why not for a little while? Because you have to learn. You have to learn that stuff. But just don't get sucked in by it. Just know that no matter what you learn from this new technology, you have to come out of it on the other side as an individual.
Because it is overwhelming, when you look at all of the things that you have to learn, and sometimes it's like, okay, maybe I can take a little bit of a shortcut on some things, and maybe I can use this.
And sometimes you can.
As a tool.
Yeah.
But the most important thing is, like you said, you have to come out of it like developing your own voice. Like, what do you have to say? And I mean, that's hard. Yeah, that's hard.
Nothing easy. There's nothing easy about it. And you don't get into the business because it's easy, because it ain't easy. But it's a different kind of hard than I've ever experienced, because it's when you do accomplish something that it really feels good, inside, even if it's just an individual thing, like for instance, when I was coming up, I did a lot of TV movies, things like that. I was taking chances. Nobody knew I was taking. Just challenging myself to do something that if I had failed, would not have been the best set of dailies. It wouldn't have ruined anything, but it was. I was taking risks. I was still trying to challenge myself, and sometimes things were. But it was a completely private thing.
Right.
I didn't tell anyone. Didn't tell the gaffer. I'm trying to try something.
Yeah.
And because I want to learn how to see into whatever shots that are too stops underexposed, and how can I find the nuance there and not make it look like mud? How can I overexpose something and not make it look like it's just washed out mess? What are the things that I need? How can I identify these things? And all that's happening inside that nobody knows. There's no reason that still can't happen. I mean, I kind of like taking that angle, because you're tailoring your needs to exactly what your life is and where you want it to go.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying with taking risks and being willing to fail is really important, because thinking again of younger, I mean, I see everything through my lens of my generation and my
So did I.
One thing that I see a lot of my peers do is, because the feedback loop is so much quicker, like what you're saying is like, man, if I took a risk in the film days, it might not even come up until I really like down the road, or the failure that maybe only you identify. And I think what I see now a lot is, okay, I'm going to shoot something and I'm thinking of, okay, what frames am I going to post on Instagram? And if I don't get enough likes on those frames, maybe they're just not good. So, and it's just like, it's a very different mentality in a lot of ways. there's benefits to it, but it's also really hard to navigate when you're constantly thinking of what are they going to say? What are they going to say? It's hard to develop that patience or that ability to be willing to take those risks if you're thinking of like the immediate gratification or like, am I going to go and post this? And, that's like a thing to navigate.
It certainly is. And it's kind of like, I think it's okay to go through those stages. If someone's trying to make it look like they're working when they're not, maybe that's not so bad. When I think what I would ask that person is identify what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
What you're trying to me, that makes me think I want to be a person who works a lot.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. Maybe this isn't the best way to kind of go about it, but that's at least what I'm saying about myself, right? I want to be that person. Let me work on that. So why not? Yes, it might be a slight bit of a misstep. It's not a career killer.
Sure.
But why not be honest? I mean, as long as they're not living a lie, if they're saying, okay, yeah, I get it. I'm posting old work, or I'm worrying too much about what other people think. I need to start focusing on myself now. So I'm going to post something. I'm going to post something that I really like, and I'm not going to even look at how many people like it because I believe in this image. I'm going to post it, and I'm not even going to look. Yes, I'm going to learn. Yes, I posted this old thing to make it look like I want to work because I do want to work. So let me figure out what that part of me, why I'm tempted to do that, and how I can take that energy and put it towards.
Yeah, still have to check your intention behind.
Yeah, it's fine.
Right. Yeah.
But just get yourself out of it, and try to identify what your body needed by doing that, and how can you go about doing that in a more pure way.
Yeah, it's a lot of what we're talking about is just self-awareness.
Yeah.
When with the skills that you have to develop, with the areas that you need to improve on, with even the intentionality behind why am I going to post this? If I need work, like you said, it's okay. I need work. I need to pay my bills.
Yeah.
But am I doing it because of that, or am I just like looking for the?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of it's maturity, and you're allowed to be young and
Sure.
take a misstep. But I think that, like where I've had those private conversations with myself, it's okay to do that and just say, I need improvement here. And, I'm not going to do that anymore because it's not creating what I need to create. And I just need to outgrow that and replace it with something else, which is, it's cut yourself some slack. And I think to anybody who's doing that, it's fine. Just get out of it and work into. Yeah, it's all part of coming up, and now, it's incredibly competitive. There's so many cinematographers out there. I know why people think that way, and I know I've run into a lot of young cinematographers that I call are looking for the magic button. What are your camera settings for this, and what are your exact settings for that? So if I set my camera up this exact way, I'll get that exact image. It's like it doesn't work that way. It's like my camera settings don't mean a thing to anyone but me.
Yep.
Yeah. Anyone in this clubhouse would probably look at those camera settings and say, "Well, Shelly's doing this wrong. He's doing that wrong."
Yeah.
And it all comes from more kind of creating yourself as an artist, your persona as an artist, and what your voice is, and what the things that are exciting you.
Yeah. Where do you pull? Speaking of growing as an artist, besides film and besides cinematography related resources, where do you go for inspiration to develop yourself as an artist?
Well, it's so funny because to me, being a cinematographer started to make sense to me when I started to figure out, I have to be the type of person a good cinematographer is. Being a good cinematographer is one thing, but being the person that is a good cinematographer is quite another. And for me, that's when things started to make sense. When I started to move, and do things. And sometimes it's It could be something small. A loader has a question on the set for you, so you take your lunch hour and you sit with them. You know, they're shooting a film over the weekend, you know, and they want to show you their lighting diagrams or their location pictures or something, and you can help with that kind of thing. And you know, you want to keep giving back. And I think, you know, and anyone who's had a mentor, all the mentors I've had, I've always been confused by, because I never understand why they're helping me. There's no reason for them to help me. Yeah. And actually there is one that I figured out, which is they're helping me because someone helped them, and they couldn't pay that person back, so they're going to pay me back. And that's something that's inherent in the world of cinematography. Cinematographers learn from other cinematographers. It's the only way to learn it, and we're used to it. We've learned from cinematographers. I'm going to teach other people. That's why cinematographers, whenever we have master classes here, we have no problem getting people to teach them, because there's a debt out there.
There's no secrets to keep, and
no secrets. There are zero secrets, and some people may hold on to a secret or two, but it's a pretty open society, and usually any cinematographer is willing to help another cinematographer or help someone who wants to be a cinematographer. That's a big part of it. So you want to be that type of person that invites that kind of interchange and can give that kind of interchange. So it's, you know.
Do you see any commonalities in people who come to the ASC to learn, or up and comers, things that is kind of like, okay, we see a pattern of things that need to be improved across many people?
You know, no, I see people in different phases of learning.
Okay.
You know, like you said, sometimes people are looking for a shortcut, you know, looking for the easy way out, or the magic button people that I just described. That's like a learning phase.
Yeah.
That has nothing to do with the person. It's not a judgment I can make about the person. It's strictly a phase that they're at where they're learning, and they're trying to figure out everything. And I would say what you need to learn as a person could potentially come at the end of your like everything you have to learn, but there's no reason it can't happen simultaneously at all. It sort of needs to happen at the same time. It's something that it's okay to work on that stuff, because you have to be, especially now. When I was growing up, cinematographers used to have there was a lot of bravado. You know, you would hear cinematographers being very temperamental on set, things like that. Not today.
Wow, that's great.
Those days are over. If you're temperamental on set, you're not going to be on set. You know, you have to be someone who a director wants to stand next to.
Yeah.
You know, you know, learning that is probably the most important thing. It's funny too, because on the flip side of that, I see people that have that twinkle in the eye. Mm-hmm. There's just something about them that you just think, okay, I think this person's gonna do well, because they just seem to have a love for it, you know, and that's super important.
Yeah, it's you have to love and fall in love with the with the art and all the elements that go with it, the good things and the bad things. Yeah,
it's everything. It's a life.
Right. Yeah. Switching gears a little bit, as far as the ASC and your role in it, how are you guys seeing and navigating the integration of all the new technologies, and AI included, and virtual productions and all of that? You know, how are you navigating? How are you guys part of the big picture? How do we even deal with this as craftsmen? You know, what's your kind of thought on that?
Well, you know, with all that stuff, virtual production, AI, yes, it seems very daunting at first. Yes, it seems it seems like something that's going to take us all over. Mm-hmm. But it's not. And I think that there are a lot of cinematographers that their knee-jerk reaction might be, oh, AI, I'm going to stay away from that. But really, it's a tool. It's a tool like any other tool. I personally don't think that any tool that is using as its source ideas that already exist is going to feel all that pure. And I think it's the type of tool that you can use to enhance or to get an idea going, things like that. That's just my point of view now.
Yeah.
That could change as I understand it more, but it's hard for me to imagine that 1,000 people's other old ideas is going to resonate better than an original idea of mine. But in the same breath, it's a piece of technology that could be used. I want to identify how I can use it to tell stories. I can certainly identify now how I can use it to help develop visuals during prep, things like that.
Yeah.
That's easy.
Yeah.
How you can use it to develop into virtual cinematography, right into post. That's easy to kind of see where that can go. But that all can happen with the cinematographer as the point of the spear. The cinematographer is still the keeper of the visual story. That's a visual tool. And so it most certainly falls under the domain of the cinematographer, because we're not cameramen, we're storytellers. We're in charge of the visuals for the movie as it pertains to the narrative telling of the story. It's not just lighting and camera, it's storytelling, and that's a tool just like, a sky panel is a tool.
Yeah.
And we gain an understanding of it. We try to use it in ways that maybe it hasn't been designed to be used. We're famous for that. Ask any construction crane contractor. We use those cranes very differently, and so it's certainly the type of tool that can be used creatively, and I think that there's no reason a cinematographer shouldn't look at that tool and think, I can still be the point of that spear.
Mm-hmm. When you look at it as a tool, then it's just another tool in your arsenal. And
absolutely.
At the end of the day, it goes back to your voice. And because one of the things that you hear a lot of being talked about right now, especially, is the industry's shift to quantity over quality. And now, you're going to have endless choices for what you want to watch. And there's 20 movies that are the same movie, but there's 5 streamers that have 20 of them across them, versus that feels, it can worry you when you think, okay, are we going to lose the artistry? Are we going to lose the stories that should be told, or that are not that don't feed the algorithm and don't feed the
right? That sounds more like a product than a work of art.
Right.
To me, you didn't see, 100 different versions of one Picasso to see to try to titillate 100 different types of viewers. You saw one work of art that was the representation that the artist was inspired by and wanted to put out there, and I don't see any reason why that should change. In terms of using films and streamers to try to stimulate, that's a whole different kind of medium, I think, and one that kind of lacks an authorship in a way.
Yeah. It's an interesting time as we're shifting into that.
It's interesting how people think that that's something they need.
Yeah.
It seems so short-sighted to me.
Yeah. And it's this idea of letting the algorithms dictate what you consume, because it just feeds you what you supposedly like, so you like this, we'll feed you that, more of that. But sometimes you don't need the things that you think you like. You need things that are going to challenge you or change your perspective. Or
if you think for more than 5 seconds about that, I mean, who's to benefit from that? You or the person giving it to you? Yeah,
exactly. I wanted to ask you, What are some of the qualities, and we've talked a little bit about that, but as the ASC, what are some of the qualities that you're wanting to kind of see people develop more, that you're seeing, everyone that comes, whether they come through the door or they're in touch through other mediums, that you're like, man, I hope that people really learn these key things?
Well, there's easy to fall on an individual storyteller. You want to be a storyteller first and foremost, and you want to have your own persona up front. You want to be able to look at an image that you made and know that, oh, that's an image that you made, not an image I'm just looking at that's from that movie. You want your images to have that kind of presence. And when I look at up and coming cinematographers now, the first thing I think about is, okay, cinematographers are younger now, and which is exciting, because a lot of that maturity that happens during the second half of your career, where they're going to have a third half to their career, if you think about it.
Yeah.
Because there's a whole half that's happening now, and I cannot wait to see how some of these younger cinematographers, how they mature into something amazing. Because what happens as you work for decades, your work becomes more refined, more nuanced, in some ways simpler, and in some ways more faceted, sometimes at the same time. And you become a master at it, but still learning. Well, these people are going to go much further than that, and to me, that's immensely exciting. That's a very exciting prospect, and one that just the art of cinematography can benefit from. So more than anything, those are the two things that I'm looking forward to. Yeah.
What is the lesson that took you the longest to learn?
Probably the one I'm still learning, which is, personality. How do you, especially the patients, how do you keep from being tempted to say the wrong thing, sometimes saying the wrong thing? How do you keep that? How do you maintain a sense of professionalism and a sense of artistic presence that has integrity, that isn't responsive to pressures, things like that, and that's probably one I'll never conquer, but it's one that's I'm constantly thinking about.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate your time.
Thank you. It was a good conversation.
It's really great talking to you, and I would love to. Yeah, there's so many other things that I'm like, man, I would love to talk about this. So maybe we'll just have to do it again.
Do it again.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoy this conversation, please give us a follow, subscribe, and check out larkhouse.com to find out more about the different initiatives that we are developing to build community and to help artists like you realize their full potential. See you soon.